Hey folks, this is Sean Bagshaw from OutdoorExposurePhoto.com and PhotoCascadia.com. In this tutorial, I'm going to show some techniques that I use to bring out subtle light in deep forest settings. I find that one of the types of light that cameras have a difficult time of capturing correctly is the subtle glowing ambient and backlight that I often find early and late in the day in deep forests. It's a very soft light, but it has a certain richness and luminosity to it, as if the foliage is almost lit from the inside. An unadjusted RAW file never quite captures it, and simply increasing saturation or contrast also doesn't render it accurately. The Orton technique and many other soft glow methods generally do a better job of increasing saturation and low frequency contrast in a way that's more satisfying. But I find that these techniques often create too much blur or glow, or they block up the shadows too much. I'm going to share a couple of techniques for enhancing this type of deep forest light that I've found particularly effective. They work best with soft, subtle, low contrast light, but you could experiment with higher contrast light as well and see what you get. The first one is very easy to do if you own Tony Kuiper's TK Action panel. Tony includes an action called Orton Lights. This action applies Tony's particular version of the Orton effect in one single easy button click. The action allows you to choose the level of blur that you want to add to the Orton effect. I usually find that somewhere around 10 to 20 pixel radius is about right. The action places a light's luminosity mask on the adjustment group. This mask constrains the adjustment to the lighter areas of the image so that the shadows don't get blocked up. You can double click on the mask and then adjust the density of the mask if you want the adjustment to bleed into the darker areas of the image even more. The blur layer is a smart object, so the blur filter can be opened again at any time if you want to further adjust the amount of blur. And the entire adjustment group can be collapsed, and you can work with the opacity of that adjustment group all at once. This enables you to dial in just the amount of that effect that you want. So you can see that does a very nice and yet subtle job of bringing out that forest light. I'm going to go ahead and delete that group now that we're done with it, and show you a second soft light glow technique that I like, and it's one that I've developed myself. I start off by duplicating the background layer, so I could either drag the background to the new layer icon, or I could just type Control or Command J. Next, I convert this new layer to a smart object. Just like in Tony's action, this will allow me to go back and adjust the amount of blur at a later time if I need to. Next, I change the blending mode of that new layer to soft light, which I can either do through the drop-down blending mode menu, or I can just click the soft light button on Tony's panel. Next, I'll add a Gaussian blur filter to this layer. Again, the amount of blur depends on how soft I want the light to be on the image. And the more foggy or misty an image is, the higher radius I'll use, and the less so, the smaller radius I'll use. This image was low enough contrast that just doing the soft light blur layer looks pretty good in this case. Sometimes though, I find that it needs a little extra adjustment, and for that I use an exposure adjustment layer. I like to set the exposure adjustment layer to the soft light blending mode as well, and that gives the overall image a little more punch. And then I use the gamma, offset, and exposure sliders to fine-tune the adjustment. So the gamma will work with the contrast of the midtones. So that high contrast that we got there from the soft light blending mode, I can dial that back a little bit. Exposure works with the brightness of the highlights, and offset works with the exposure of the darks or the shadows. So I can work with that a little bit there. And in fact, using the scrubby slider gives me a lot of really fine control, and that opens up those shadows a little bit. And you can see that that adjustment has given that glowy light even a little bit more of a punch. If I feel it's too much, I can work with the opacity of that layer a little bit to get it more where I want it. And the other thing that I'll often do is select both of these layers and then holding down the shift key, click on the group folder icon to place both of those layers into a group that I'll call my soft light glow group. Now that both of those layers are in the group together, I can work with the opacity of the group to dial in just the amount of the adjustment that I want. In this image, I haven't blocked up the shadows too bad, but if I find that I have blocked up the shadows more than I want to, I will often add a white mask to the group, and then using Tony Kuiper's TK Action panel, select one of the darker darks luminosity selections, in this case a number 4. Then I'll type Control or Command H to hide the selection lines, and then click on the white mask and then fill with black through that selection. So I could go to Edit, Fill, and select black and say OK. And what this will do is it will fill that mask with black through that darks luminosity selection, and that'll help keep the adjustment out of the shadows even more. And if I feel like it lightened up the shadows too much, I can always double click on the mask and adjust the density of the mask to get just the right degree. So let's take a look at how that adjustment looks. There's the rather flat, lifeless raw file, and there's the image after I've used my soft light glow method with those adjustment layers and that luminosity mask to enhance that light and really try to make that glow that I was feeling while I was there come through in the image. So those are two methods that I frequently use to attempt to recreate the way that awesome deep forest light looks to me. I hope you find them useful. You can check out my YouTube channel for more image developing tutorials. You can also visit my website for complete video tutorial series and for more information on Tony Kuiper's actions and panel.